by which I mean we've been taking on pieces which no one thought and dared think of the orchestra as being able to achieve. 6 or 7 years ago, we did the Daphnis and Chloe suite of Ravel, which the then orchestra played very well. We did the Franz Schmidt Symphony No. 4 that had never been heard here before. Did a wonderful job. 2 years ago, we did the Prokofiev Symphony No. 5. Likewise, those of you that heard it. Nothing lackluster there. And I've been waiting and wondering for over 20 years to decide whether we might do Till Eulenspiegel's Merry Pranks. And we're doing it. You will see. This is a piece that well known throughout the world. Just briefly to remind you, a roguish fellow known from medieval times called Till Eulenspiegel, who played pranks of all kinds. And Strauss has a whole series of 15 or 18 different scenes, you might say, miniature scenes that he describes. He loved to describe things in music. He once said he felt if he had to or wanted to, he could describe a glass of water in music. The fact is, he described a lot of things wonderfully well. And just to touch on a few of the sequences here, Till Eulenspiegel, first of all, it starts out with a phrase that says, "Once upon a time." Other people have done that. Dukas did the same thing in The Sorcerer's Apprentice. And composers like to do that. Then at the beginning, the famous horn solo sort of characterizes the spirit of Till. Incidentally, that horn solo, which when he first gave out the parts to the Munich Opera, the players said they couldn't be done. And he said, "What do you mean it can't be done? I took it down from one of you practicing not long ago before a rehearsal." It could be done, and it has been done, and it will be done, and it is being done. So the characterization of Till from that. Then along the way, he rides roughshod into the marketplace, overturning the carts and produce of the women in the marketplace. He peeps from behind hiding places. He gives a mock sermon. He plays the ardent lover. He gives argument to philosophers about points of theology. There's a street song which we don't know whether he sings or someone else sings. And then there's a mad chase. The citizenry get fed up with him and they chase him all over the map and they finally catch him and they're going to string him up. Unmistakable pre-hanging music. But I don't think he ever did get hanged. And it ends with the Once Upon a Time music with which it started. It is a classic masterpiece of a tone poem. Richard Strauss, written almost exactly 100 years ago, 1894.
Till Eulenspiegel by Richard Strauss, concluding the first half of this concert this evening by the Portland Youth Philharmonic Orchestra, conducted by Jacob Avshalomov. Mr. Avshalomov is asking the various sections of the orchestra to stand, and now the entire orchestra standing with him on stage here in the Arlene Schnitzer Concert Hall at the Portland Center for the Performing Arts. And once again, Mr. Avshalomov has been recalled center stage. And now the orchestra standing with him. With the playing of Richard Strauss till Eulenspiegel, we come to the end of the first half of this evening's concert by the Portland Youth Philharmonic. Earlier we heard the Overture to Alibaba by Luigi Cherubini and the Flute Concerto of Jacques Ibert. You're listening to this concert by the Portland Youth Philharmonic Orchestra on KPBS FM, Portland's classical station at 89.9. We'll return for the second half of this evening's program in just a few minutes. It's intermission time in this concert by the Portland Youth Philharmonic Orchestra, and once again I have with me Jacob Avshalomov. Good evening, Mr. Avshalomov.
Good evening, Darryl.
Tonight we've heard the first half of the concert containing three works, and we're going to finish up with a single work, the Symphony of Johann Svendsen. Where in the world did you find this?
Well, I'll be happy to tell you, but before I do, let me offer congratulations to you and Dr. Svendsen and your staff for having the pleasure of moving into splendid new premises behind the school. We've been doing programs of this kind for a long, long time, and the Orchestra Association and I have always appreciated your cordial interest. And I just want to take this opportunity to let the listening public know how gratified we are that you have working premises suitable for your work.
Thank you for your good wishes, and I must say that we're delighted to be in new facilities. And
of course.
We are obviously recording this prior to the time when it's being heard, and we're sitting in one of the new studios right now.
To answer your question about the Svendsen Symphony, one of the nice things about doing the work that I do is that over the years I've been able to explore some of the byways of orchestral literature while at the same time fulfilling our responsibility of doing the major works and the standard works and the masterpieces of Western music which are suitable for our students' education. From time to time we do turn up interesting things. A few years ago, you may remember, we did the Franz Schmidt Symphony No. 4, which I found a very moving work and which was a high point in the orchestra's accomplishments. As you probably remember, each spring I invite the members of the orchestra as well as the board to make suggestions for the following year's repertory. I always ask for them in the form of a little note so I can collect them and pore over them when it comes time to make my new programs. And last spring, my principal second violin, Karen Waltenson, not only came with a little written note, but came with a little biography and a cassette of two symphonies by Johann Svendsen, Norwegian composer of the 19th century, of whom I had just heard the vaguest glimmerings. It's one of those names you run across in your study of music history. I'd never heard a note of his. And she, being of Scandinavian descent, had tracked it down, and
I took it home and played it, and the first symphony is just an absolutely charming is the word I was about to use, but it's more than that. It's more than that. It has verve. That's probably the most important single characteristic. He lived a very impecunious life, traveled widely, many parts of Europe, England, served as violinist, as conductor, and composer. He taught, was never able somehow to make much money. He was always in need. But somehow or other he kept his eye on the ball, creatively speaking, and he turned out Violin Concerto, these two symphonies and other works. And this piece just has a wonderful life force to it. Not of a dramatic kind that you get in Carl Nielsen. And also at the same time, he's not what you would call a dialect composer in the way that some of Grieg's pieces have turns of melody that seem like a dialect from the Scandinavian regions. This man shows the training and the influences that he had in other parts of Europe. He studied in Germany. He knew the music of Berlioz. He knew, obviously, the music of Grieg. And for those people who are unfamiliar with this name, it will seem to you as though you've already heard music of this sort, but not this piece. It will remind you a little of Grieg, a little of Dvorak, a little of Berlioz, with a sense of dash that Berlioz has. Wonderfully scored. No tricks, nothing up his sleeve, but a few nice little eccentricities along the way. Uses of grace notes, uses of pizzicato, very delicate pizzicato across the strings in the entire string section that make it sound like a very delicate, enormous but delicate guitar. And then there are broad melodies with a sweep as generous as anybody you can imagine. You keep your ears open, everybody, and listen to this wonderful four-movement symphony by Johann Svendsen.
And within about 15 or 20 minutes, we'll be hearing it. Is this one of the works you're going to take on the Asian tour with you?
Do you know, it's one of the ones I offered, but they preferred to have something better known, reflecting your own remark before the program here, and that is, how did we come to choose such an unknown piece? Well, as I say, that's one of the functions I see that we have, to bring things forward that have dropped out of sight in a way unjustly or unnecessarily. But especially in Korea, in Seoul, Korea, the music director of the Cultural Arts Center there, where we're performing, requested, in fact insisted, that we bring something as familiar as the New World Symphony. And then he wanted to have a soloist from Seoul on each of the two concerts, and even proposed the works. So we find ourselves preparing what amounts to a complete extra program this year. We have all we can do really to prepare 4 main programs of this difficulty. But in between preparing this evening's concert, we managed to do the Dvorak New World Symphony. As soon as this concert is over, as we start preparing the May concert, some of which works will be taken to Asia, we're also going to squeeze in the Grieg Piano Concerto and the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto, which is what they requested. Now, those are both easy pieces, but they're both 25 minutes long, and it's a lot of music to learn. So we are essentially, to please our Asian hosts, having to prepare one full program's worth of additional music.
Now, how many concerts will you be playing altogether during the tour?
On the tour, there are 3 formal concerts, 2 in Seoul and 1 in Sapporo. And then there's a serenade at the City Hall for the public and dignitaries and so on in Sapporo. There are 3 school visits with small groups performing and demonstrating and interacting with the students of those schools. And then there'll be a school visit in Seoul, as well as a visit to a place called Lotte, which is a combination a department store, art center, fair, and so on. An interesting kind of place that I've never seen, but I'll be curious to see.
Sounds like it might be a Saturday market.
Well, no, I'm sure it's much larger, and it's a formal building. I mean, if you can imagine something larger than Nordstrom's, with a big space in it to perform, is something what I have in mind. But I'll tell you when we get back.
We'll look forward to learning about that. How long will you and the orchestra be on tour?
10 days. It's one of the shorter tours. In '79 we went to Japan. It was 11 days. This time it's 10 days. And the shortness is dictated partly by the fact of the calendar. Usually we try to make a tour in the spring that straddles spring vacation, plus a week on either side. This time, because of the available date in Seoul, we had to accept the dates there after spring vacation was over. And we had to carefully take a sounding with members of the orchestra to see if they felt they could be away from school, miss a whole week of school after that, plus the 2 weekends. And most of the people in the orchestras are really pretty good students, dependable, conscientious. And we found that practically everybody was able to do that. There are a few that are not going for a variety of reasons. Some are left out because of the minimum age requirement. And some are doing auditions at professional schools at that time, and so on. So there we'll be traveling with 91. And that's why we've had to limit the length of the tour to 10 days.
91 is a fair-sized group to be traveling.
It's a pretty good size. Well, that's just the players. Then there are the adult escorts and then staff and technical assistants and so on. And so there'll be well over 100 people, 115 or so.
Well, we wish you well on the tour and in all of the performances.
Thank you.
In your newsletter for the winter quarter, titled Quarter Notes, you discussed the visit of percussionist George Gabor. Tell me about that.
Yes, that was just one of those nice flukes. George, I think he says George Gaber and I first met in New York, my goodness, in 1947 or 8, when he was a freelance percussionist, one of the leading players in New York, and a real whiz. And he played in an orchestra that was pulled together by the legendary conductor Leopold Stokowski when he did a program of contemporary works at the Museum of Modern Art. And that included a work of mine for solo clarinet and chamber orchestra and 5 percussion players. And George Gaber was the leading percussionist at that time, and we were friends ever since then. And over the years, we've crossed paths here and there. A couple of times at Aspen, one year when I conducted at Aspen. He's been teaching at Aspen for many years. And then, by a curious circumstance, about 8 or so years ago, he was visiting at the coast in Oregon, he and his wife, and met the mother of Emma Shook, who was our concertmaster and soloist about 4 years ago, and her sister Anna. And they seemed talented girls. The mother wanted George to hear them and give an opinion as to what their potential might be. And he thought he saw potential in the girls and suggested that they ought to move to Portland where they could get in the Portland Youth Philharmonic and so on. Well, their mother, Roberta Badger, who has since become a friend and who has been a stalwart member of the Sing Your Own Messiah core group, they did move to Portland, and they did audition for the Portland Youth Philharmonic. And not only did they get in, both Anna and Emma, who is a cellist, but Emma became concertmaster and also soloist. So that chance bumping into George Gaber for that family changed their lives altogether. Well, he wrote to me, or wrote to her, Mrs. Badger actually, to say he was coming west again and would like to see me. And to make a long story short, I invited him to come to a rehearsal Turned out he could only come on a Thursday night rather than Wednesday, which is the full orchestra. But I said, no, that's just fine. Wednesday's when we rehearse winds, brass, and percussion. And if he comes on Thursday night, I'll put him to work and stick him onto the percussion section. So he came. He was delighted. I sent the percussion section, all 5 of them at that time we needed, working on the Respighi Rossiniana suite. Sent them in another room with him and a score, and they had an hour and a half rehearsal with one of the leading pedagogues in percussion in the world. He just retired from many years teaching at the University of Indiana, is now doing clinics in exotic places, Singapore, Shanghai, Venezuela, all over. And he had a wonderful time with them, and they, of course, were thrilled to be working with him. And needless to say, the percussion section shone in the Respighi piece when we performed it in November.
And recollection is that they had a lot to do in that piece.
They had a lot to do. Yeah, he chose a very good time to visit.
It's amazing sometimes how those things work out.
That's right.
As if someone knew that the extra help would be nice to have at the moment.
Exactly. And sometimes chance things of that sort work out better than something that you planned. We could have made a contractual arrangement with someone of that stature to come in, and then it just didn't work out for a variety of reasons. So serendipity helps.
That's sometimes the best of all. Last year, you did a television program, Musical Encounters.
Oh, yes.
The orchestra and its parts, and I understand that that's an award winner.
Right. We talked about that at one of our recent programs last season. We took great pleasure in going down with about 2/3 of the orchestra, which was all the studio could hold, to OPB, and we filmed this program for children called Musical Encounter, which is the dream child of Sylvia Cunin, a musician and educator who lives in Los Angeles, and she was very pleased with our orchestra. And when we finished filming, she said, "Well, this could be one of the best ones in the series." Well, as often happens after a concert, people come up to me and say, "Oh, that's the best concert ever." And I know in my heart that it wasn't really the best concert ever, but I accept the compliment and the remark as a signal of how good they felt about the event right then. And so when Mrs. Cunin said that to me, as I say, I had no way of judging or comparing our program with the 24 others or so that she had done, I having seen only 2 or 3. But I accepted it as a measure of her contentment with how we did. Later, I heard that she was telling people that coming up to working with the Portland Youth Philharmonic was just like having a vacation. She just had a wonderful time. So I'm really gratified when her hunch was confirmed by this foundation in Chicago that judges programs, educational programs for young people annually, and cited our program for an award. Very nice.
And our congratulations to you, and it just
thanks.
shows what we've known all along, that it's a fine, fine orchestra.
Thank you.
Once again, our time has come to an end. Thank you for joining me this evening, Mr. Avshalomov.
It's always a pleasure, Darryl.
Returning now to the Portland Center for the Performing Arts. In just a few minutes, the orchestra will be back on stage for this concert by the Portland Youth Philharmonic. And we'll conclude this evening's program with the Symphony No. 1 in D major, Opus 4, by Johann Svendsen. This is a Portland premiere for the orchestra. Johann Svendsen was born in Christiania, the city now known as Oslo, in September of 1840. KBPS FM stereo in Portland.